Mehmed II ruled for 3 more decades. He expanded his empire deep into the Balkans and the Middle East. He sponsored scholars, poets, architects, but even he knew the magnitude of what he had done in 1453. He was not simply a sultan who conquered a city, he was the man who closed a chapter of history. Yet, century later, the story still haunts. In 1919, as the Ottoman Empire itself collapsed after World War I, Greek forces landed in Anatolia, dreaming of a greater Greece and a reclaimed Constantinople. They called it the Megali idea, the great idea. But that dream, too, would drown in blood. Today, Istanbul is a sprawling metropolis, a bridge between East and West. Its skyline is no longer defined by church domes but by minarets and glass towers. The Hagia Sophia, converted into a mosque in 1453, became a museum in 1935, and in 2020 was once again declared a mosque. The city still shifts. Its soul, if cities can have one, is layered in paradox. Final reflection. So, what truly fell in 1453? Was it a city? Or an idea? A system of faith? Or a sense of permanence? Perhaps the greater tragedy of Constantinople is not that it fell, but that so few heard its warning. That empires are not eternal. That walls crack. That the weight of legacy is not enough to hold back the tide. Yet, in every historian who walks its ruins, in every mosaic that still catches candlelight, in every whispered prayer beneath Hagia Sophia's dome, the echo remains. The city may have fallen, but its story never did. For over 1,000 years, the city of Constantinople had stood as the impregnable capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call Byzantium. Founded by Emperor Constantine in 330 AD, it was more than a city. It was an idea made marble. Roman law, Greek language, Christian faith, a fusion of ancient civilizations, surrounded by walls that had withstood centuries of assault. By the 15th century, however, this glorious inheritance had withered. Once a titan of trade and culture, Constantinople had become a ghost of itself. Its population had dwindled to under 50 ling. The once bustling harbors were quiet, the aqueducts dry, yet its triple-layered land walls, 12 meters high and almost 5 meters thick, still loomed like the shoulders of giants. To the Christian world, Constantinople remained the second Rome, sacred, eternal, untouchable. But to the rising Islamic world, especially the ambitious Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, it was unfinished business. The Ottomans had been expanding steadily westward for over a century. They had inherited gunpowder from the Chinese and theirs, siege warfare from the Mongols, and strategic cunning from centuries of Islamic and Turkic military tradition. Mehmed, ascending to the throne in 1451 at the age of just 19, saw what his father Murad had not dared to attempt, a final blow that would unite East and West under the crescent. He began preparations in secret. He brought in engineers from across Europe. He commissioned the construction of the largest cannon the world had ever seen, a monstrous bombard called the Basilica, built by a Hungarian named Orban, capable of hurling a 600-pound stone over a mile. It would become the symbol of a new age, where walls, no matter how old or sacred, could be broken by fire. Inside Constantinople, Emperor Constantine XI, Palaiologos, knew what was coming. He had only 7,000 defenders, half of them foreign mercenaries, including a Venetian fleet and a Genoese soldier of fortune named Giovanni Giustiniani, who would prove to be one of the siege's most crucial figures. Constantine was no tyrant. nor a fool. He had ruled a decaying empire with dignity and stoicism. He sent letters across Europe pleading for help, invoking Christian brotherhood and the threat of Ottoman expansion. The Pope offered words. Venice and Genoa sent ships, but new army came. Western Europe, divided by its own petty wars and schisms, left Constantinople to stand alone. It was a betrayal, cloaked in distance, a silence that thundered louder than Mehmed's cannons. And so, on the 6th of April, 1453, the siege began. The basilica cannon fired its first shot. A wall shook. The world shifted. The early weeks were brutal, day and night. The Ottomans bombarded the walls, firing, reloading, dragging the massive artillery through mud and blood. Giustiniani's men held firm. Repairs were made. Sorties were launched. Every breach was patched. Mehmed tried tunnels. His sappers dug beneath the walls to plant explosives. The Byzantines, using captured engineers to counter mines. In the choking dust below the city, men fought like phantoms, swinging swords in darkness, killing by feel. When that failed, Mehmed turned to the sea. He tried to outflank the defenders by moving his fleet into the Golden Horn, the narrow harbor guarded by a massive iron chain. The Byzantines had blocked it. So Mehmed did the unthinkable, in a feat of audacity that still astonishes military historians. The Ottomans dragged 70 ships overland, greased logs laid across the hills north of the city. By morning, the defenders awoke to find Turkish war galleys floating in their protected harbor. The message was clear. No wall, no water, no God would save them. The arrival of Mehmed's fleet in the Golden Horn shattered any illusion of safety. For centuries, the waters had been Constantinople's silent shield calm. Narrow, defensible. Now, they reflected the crimson sails of Ottoman ships and the thunderous promise of encirclement. There would be no escape, no supplies, no retreat. Inside the city, panic simmered. The clergy called for more prayers. The emperor ordered more barricades. Fathers dug trenches beside their sons. Women sewed bandages from altar cloths. Each day began with cannon fire and ended with psalms. But there was a rhythm to the siege. Grim tempo. Bombardment at dawn. Dust and ash by noon. Sorties in the evening. Morning by moonlight. The Ottomans tested the walls endlessly, especially the sector by the gate of St. Romanus. Giustiniani's Genoese men repelled every assault, their armor gleaming like silver ghosts above the parapets. Yet for every Ottoman soldier lost, a dozen more stepped forward. The empire could not match that scale. Still, the Byzantines held. For over 6 weeks, they endured the unendurable. The Theodosian walls groaned but did not fall. Even the great cannon, for all its power, cracked under its own strain. Repairs took days. Urban, the engineer, was killed in an accident. But Mehmed pressed on. He was not a commander who flinched. Behind his youthful face was a mind consumed by history. He knew that Alexander had wept for new worlds. Caesar had crossed the Rubicon. Now it was his turn. He would not be remembered as a sultan. He would be remembered as a conqueror. And so the pressure mounted. By mid-May, food was running out inside the city. Horses were slaughtered. Rats, once reviled, became meals. The people, once devout, began to question the heavens. Some blamed the union with Rome, believing the Latin Mass in Hagia Sophia had cursed them. Others whispered that God had abandoned the new Rome as punishment for pride. The emperor remained composed. Constantine XI walked the ramparts daily, speaking with soldiers, blessing the wounded, reinforcing that he would never abandon his people. He wore no crown, only a sword. To him, death would be preferable to exile. Meanwhile, Mehmed planned his final assault. On May 25th, he summoned his generals. The time had come. The city had resisted long enough. Morale inside the Ottoman camp remained high due in part to promises of 3 days of plunder if the city fell. That had always been the custom, and it would ensure his army's total commitment. He scheduled the attack for the night of May 28th. As the sun rose on that final day, the city held a last procession. The emperor, clergy, nobles, and soldiers, Orthodox and Catholic alike, marched through the streets toward Hagia Sophia. For one night, the old quarrels dissolved. Giustiniani prayed beside Greek monks. Latin banners waved beside Byzantine icons. In the cathedral's flickering candlelight, Constantine XI knelt before the altar. Those who witnessed it say he wept. Then he rose, mounted the walls, and vanished into the ranks of his men. Shortly after midnight, on May 29th, the assault began. First came the irregulars' wild, undisciplined troops hurled at the walls to exhaust the defenders. Many fell before they reached the moat. Others died screaming on the spikes and sharpened palisades. The defenders fought with arrows, boiling oil, and stones. Then came the Anatolian troops, better trained, heavier armed. They surged forward under the cover of darkness, battering at breaches, trying to scale ladders and platforms. Giustiniani's men countered them with grim efficiency, swords flashing in torchlight. But the third wave was different. These were the Janissaries, the elite shock troops of the Ottoman Empire, raised from childhood, converted from Christianity, fanatically loyal to the sultan. As dawn broke, they advanced in eerie silence. Drums pounded, banners unfurled. Their discipline was unlike anything the defenders had yet faced. It was at this moment that fate intervened. Giustiniani was struck. Accounts vary whether by arrow, shot, or shrapnel. Badly wounded. He ordered his men to carry him from the wall. Seeing him retreat broke the morale of the Genoese. The line at the gate of St. Romanus faltered. Constantine fought to rally the troops. Some say he tore off his imperial regalia, crying, "The city is lost, but I live." Before charging into the melee, no one ever saw him again. His body was never found. The Ottomans poured through the breach. Gates were thrown open. Cows erupted. Churches became battlegrounds. Houses burned. Swords flashed in narrow alleys. Screams echoed through the Forum of Constantine. By midday, the city was lost. The streets of Constantinople, once hushed with sacred chants and imperial processions, now thundered with iron-shod boots. Smoke and the cries of the dying. The Ottoman army fanned out through the city in organized chaos. Fires spread unchecked. Statues toppled. The sound of shattered icons and splintered marble drowned out the peal of broken church bells. As promised, Mehmed allowed his soldiers 3 days of unrestricted looting. Palaces were gutted, manuscripts burned, families torn apart. In the chaos, centuries of knowledge vanished, priceless relics of the ancient world, preserved for generations by Byzantine scribes, were lost in hours. Libraries that had survived Goths and Crusaders now fell to the torch. The Hagia Sophia, the greatest church in Christendom, became the final symbol of the empire's fall. Its doors were battered open by Janissaries. Those inside had gathered to pray, hoping for divine salvation, perhaps imagining that angels would descend from heaven to strike down the infidel. No miracle came. The Great Dome, which had once echoed the anthems of emperors, now rang with the call of conquest. But amid the ruin, there was no slaughter without control. Mehmed entered the city not as a barbarian, but as a ruler. He ordered his elite guard to protect key sites. He declared that the plunder would end. He walked into Hagia Sophia, paused beneath its dome, and proclaimed it a mosque. "The city is mine," he said, "but let it endure." This moment was more than military victory. It was theatrical. Mehmed understood symbolism. He saw himself as a Caesar, a second Constantine, not a destroyer of Rome, but its successor. He was 21 years old. What happened to Constantine XI remains one of history's haunting mysteries. Some say he died sword in hand, defending the breach at the gate of St. Romanus. Others believe he tried to flee, disguising himself among the soldiers. A few stories, fantastical in tone, claim that he escaped through secret tunnels beneath the city and waits in stone, to return when Constantinople is once again free. But history is not kind to ghosts. Most likely, the last Roman emperor died in the mud, his blood mixing with those of merchants, priests, and mercenaries, a monarch without a tomb, a crown, or even a name upon the marble. His empire died with him. With Constantine's death, the Eastern Roman Empire, which had survived the fall of the West by nearly a millennium, ceased to exist. It did not go out with ceremony, but with defiance, a defiance that would echo in chronicles, in poetry, and in the darkened pages of lost manuscripts. In the aftermath, Mehmed worked quickly to rebuild and reframe the city. He called himself Kaiser Caesar of Rome, and ordered architects, engineers, and scholars to repopulate the city. He invited Greeks, Armenians, Jews, and Slavs to settle in Constantinople, promising protection and privileges. The city was renamed Istanbul, derived from the Greek Is tin Poland, to the city. Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque, but its Christian mosaics were not destroyed. They were covered. In this gesture, Mehmed revealed not just a conqueror's brutality, but a politician's patience. He wanted Constantinople to be the heart of a new empire, Ottoman in army, Islamic in faith, but Roman in prestige. He reopened trade routes, commissioned schools and palaces, repaired aqueducts from the ashes of Byzantium. A new capital emerged, one that will last for nearly 500 years. Yet, not all accepted this transition. To the Christian West, the fall of Constantinople was a catastrophe. The Second Rome had fallen, and with it, the last vestige of the Roman Empire. Panic spread through Europe. In Italy, artists and scholars fled east, carrying Greek texts and classical knowledge, unknowingly fueling the Renaissance. Pope Nicholas V called for a crusade. The bells of Rome tolled, but new armies sailed. The kings of Europe, distracted by their own ambitions, had once again failed to unite. Some blamed the schism between Orthodox and Catholic. Others pointed fingers at Venice and Genoa, rivals in trade, who had undermined Byzantium for centuries. But it was too late. The Ottoman Empire now stood at the gates of Europe, and behind those gates was not a medieval kingdom, but a modernizing power armed with cannon, bureaucracy, and the vision of empire. For the Eastern Orthodox world, the fall of Constantinople was not merely a military event, it was an apocalypse. Churches far beyond Byzantium's old borders marked the day with black cloth and silence. In Russia, Ivan III would eventually declare Moscow the Third Rome, positioning himself as the spiritual heir to the fallen empire. But the wound ran deeper than any throne could inherit. It was a severing of memory of liturgy. of art, of political continuity. The city had been not only a bastion of Christian faith, but a gatekeeper of Greco-Roman civilization, and now that gate had been closed, sized, and repurposed. The empire that had once built aqueducts and domes, debated theology in golden chambers, and crowned emperors with the blessing of heaven was now a province in someone else's world. But history rarely offers a clean death. Even as the Ottomans rebuilt Istanbul into a jewel of Islam, the memory of Byzantium refused to die. In hidden monasteries, monks preserved liturgies in fading ink. Refugees brought scrolls and secrets to Venice, Florence, and Krakow. Greek became fashionable again in Western universities. And from these fragments, the Renaissance blossomed not as a resurrection of Roman glory, but as its unexpected afterlife. Ironically, the fall of Constantinople may have lit the flame of modernity in the very lands that had once let the city fall. The siege of 1453 is studied in military academies to this day, not simply because it marked the end of an empire, but because it marked the birth of a new kind of warfare. The Theodosian walls, once thought impenetrable, were undone, not by treachery or famine, but by gunpowder. Cannon had rendered ancient defenses obsolete. Urban's monstrous bombards showed that walls could no longer protect the old order. In one sense, Constantinople's fall was a technological reckoning. Mehmed had seen the future and built his army to match it. Constantine, noble though he was, fought with the past. He placed his trust in honor, stone, and alliances that never came. And therein lies a bitter truth. Courage, without scale or support, can still lose. But there's another truth harder, deeper. Constantinople did not fall only because of external force. It fell because it had been alone for too long. Centuries of religious schism, political infighting, and economic missteps had left it isolated. When the end came, a few answered its cries. Empires do not collapse in a day. They rot inward long before the final siege. Mehmed II ruled for 3 more decades. He expanded his empire deep into the Balkans and the Middle East. He sponsored scholars, poets, architects, but even he knew the magnitude of what he had done in 1453. He was not simply a sultan who conquered a city, he was the man who closed a chapter of history. Yet, a century later, the story still haunts. In 1919, as the Ottoman Empire itself collapsed after World War I, Greek forces landed in Anatolia. Dreaming of a greater Greece and a reclaimed Constantinople, they called it the Megali idea, the great idea. But that dream, too, would drown in blood. Today, Istanbul is a sprawling metropolis, a bridge between East and West. Its skyline is no longer defined by church domes, but by minarets and glass towers. The Hagia Sophia, converted into a mosque in 1453, became a museum in 1935, and in 2020, was once again declared a mosque. The city still shifts. Its soul, if cities can have one, is layered in paradox. So, what truly fell in 1453? Was it a city, or an idea, a system of faith, or a sense of permanence? Perhaps the greater tragedy of Constantinople is not that it fell, but that so few heard its warning. That empires are not eternal. That walls crack. That the weight of legacy is not enough to hold back the tide. Yet, in every historian who walks its ruins, in every mosaic that still catches candlelight, in every whispered prayer beneath Hagia Sophia's dome, the echo remains. The city may have fallen, but its story never did.